What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are going to dive right in. This video is going to be a continuation of the series from zero to continuous delivery. However, this video can also be helpful if you're just trying to add a domain name for your web app or your API or whatever it is. You're trying to register a domain name using Amazon's Route 53 service. And so I'm going to show you guys how to do that using the Aws console. It's very simple. And then once we get that domain set up, we'll look at how we can configure our sales JavaScript app that we made in the previous videos in the series. Again, if you're not following along with us on this video series and you are using your own application, totally fine. You won't need to look at that part, but we're going to do that at the end of the video. So let's get right into the Route 53 service. First thing you're going to need to do is to go to the Aws console. Go ahead and log in. And we're going to go to the services section, and we're going to go ahead and find Route 53 underneath network and content delivery. So we'll go ahead and click on Route 53. All right, so once we're in Route 53, the first thing that we're going to want to do together is to register our domain. So go to left and click on Register Domains. And you won't have anything here yet, but you'll want to click Register Domain. This is where you get to type in whatever domain name that you want, and AWS will be able to tell us if that name is taken. It'll also show you how much you can expect to pay for a year of registering that domain. So we're going to go ahead and choose a test one, kevthedev test.com. Now I can change it to being a different extension if I want. I can see the different prices here, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it at .com, and I'm going to check and see if that is available. It will tell me whether or not it is available, and I can either add it to my cart, or I can choose a alternative one that is either a different extension, maybe .info, or it'll be a slightly modified version of the domain name. But ours was available, so I'll go ahead and hit add to cart. Now you can see over here on the right hand side, you'll see that my cart includes the cost of that domain. And if you want to, for some reason, get more than one, then go wild here. Add them all to your cart if you want. But once you're done, you're going to go ahead and hit continue. So I'm going to skip a scene here. When you click continue, you're going to see a page filled with your personal information. So your billing address, you'll fill that out. Fill out where you want to register the email address and your physical address of the registrar of the domain. So fill that out and then go on to the next screen. Okay, so we're on the next screen here. After you've clicked continue from the previous screen, scroll down and you'll see these questions here. So managing DNS for your new domain. Route 53 does some things for you. Do you want to automatically renew it? It's up to you. Enable, disable. If you don't want to get charged for it again next year, maybe hit disable. Once you read the terms and conditions, right, click I have read and then complete the order. Now I'm not going to click it because I already registered mine. Okay, so now once you've clicked complete order and you've registered your domain and you've paid for it, you will have something new in your hosted zones section of Route 53. So if you click hosted zones, what you're going to see is a new zone for the domain that you just registered. And if you click on it, you'll see some more information about it. Now, what we want to do is add a record, an A record, and we want to route traffic for anyone that types in your domain. I'm just going to use mine from now on, flagrantfox.com. Good old Microsoft name generator there. We're going to want to route traffic from flagrantfox.com to a web server or API or whatever it is you're trying to route traffic to. You're going to make an A record and route it to a specific IP address. Now, I've already got one here, but I'll go ahead and delete that and so that we can create it together. Now, these two records here are important for Route 53 to work properly, so don't modify those two records there. We want to create a new A record, okay? Now, before we get into this, we actually need to grab the IP address of wherever you're trying to route traffic to. So if you're following along with the Sales.js web series, then you're going to go to your EC2 service, or go to services. We're going to go to EC2, and we're going to find the IP address of the web server that we're using that hosts our Sales.js application. Okay, so go to instances and find the instance that we're using to run our web server. This one is mine here. So then we're going to grab the public IP address. Once we've grabbed the public IP address, we're going to go back to Route 53 and we will use it there. So go back to services, Route 53, and we're going to go back and create that A record that we almost created. So hosted zones, flagrantfox.com. Now I'm going to create a record. There's a lot of different options here that you can choose from, and they are nuanced and they are for different purposes. But for us, we have one web server we're trying to route things to. We don't have a load balancer. We're not using some form of reverse proxy yet. So we are just going to do simple routing, and we're going to send it right directly to that instance. So we're going to do simple routing. We're going to click next. We're going to define a simple record. Now we're going to do the naked domain, which is just using the raw, the flagrantfox.com. We're not going to have any subdomains here. We're going to route to a specific IP address. We're going to paste in our IP that we grabbed from before, and we're going to make sure that it says a record for routes traffic to an IP address with some resources. And then for development purposes, I like to lower the DNS time to live down to a minute. The longer it is, the longer it takes for changes to propagate to the different DNS servers. So lower is good for development purposes. So that just means every 60 seconds, then your browser is going to reach back out to the DNS server to make sure that it has an up-to-date translation between domain name and IP address. So we're going to keep it around a minute. We're going to click define, and we want to create one record, type A. Yes, that's good. Create records. And we should have three records within the hosted zone, and the most important one being this A record here. All right, now that we have our domain and our records, let's put it into action and test that it works okay. So for the purposes of just testing, we're going to install something else on our instance that, if you have been following along with the past video series, we're not going to use again. But for just the purposes of this video, we're going to install Apache temporarily and use that to test this record. So to do that, we're going to need to SSH into our instance and install a couple things. So using the key pair that we created the instance with, you're going to SSH into that instance. So go ahead and SSH into your EC2 instance now. Okay, so if we're following along, it's going to be SSH-I. I know my key is in... actually, I need to make sure which key I'm using. So I'm going to go back to EC2, instances, click on my instance. Which key pair did I use? Kev the dev. Okay, it's actually in my desktop. Kev the dev.pem. Okay, that's my key. And we are going to go to this address here. And remember, when you SSH in, you always SSH in as EC2 user. There we go. Now we're in. Go ahead and clear the screen. Okay, so we're going to just quickly install Apache. So we're going to do a yum. Actually, we have to elevate privileges first. So we'll do a sudo su to go to root. We will do a yum install httpd -y for yes to accept all of the questions that it asks us as it downloads and installs dependencies. So now we have httpd or Apache installed on our machine, and we are going to do, we're going to start the service. So we should just be able to do service httpd start. And now that the service is started, we we should cd to var www, and then there should be cd into HTML. Nothing in here, so we're going to go ahead and make a little HTML file. So I'm going to use Vim, and I'm just going to do vim index.html, and I will make a quick HTML header. Hey there. Hey there. All right, and we'll end the header, and then end the HTML document. Save that. ls, there it is. We'll cat it out to make sure that it is what we think. Yep. So now by default, Apache is going to serve index.html when you access the root URL. So Apache is running. So that means it's serving up the index.html on port 80. So if we were to manually go to this IP address, and we don't need to enter a port because by default it goes to port 80, we should see the hey there index.html. So we know that that's working. But now I should be able to go to flagrantfox.com and see the same document. So let's try that. So there it is. We see that the document is currently being served from the same domain that we just hit from the IP address. So now we've verified that the domain is being routed properly. So if that's all you needed to know, then you should be good to go. If you're following along with me building the Sales.js app out and fleshing it out a little bit more, we've got a few more steps here because we don't use Apache to run our Node app. We use Node. So we need to make Node able to listen to these web requests, and that's going to be a little bit trickier. So let's dive in and figure that out. All right, so we're going to use Node, right, to run our web server. So we need to stop Apache. So we're going to go ahead and tell Apache to stop operating. Okay, so we do that by doing a sudo service httpd stop. Okay, so now we should no longer have Apache running and listening on port 80. We need to be listening on port 80, and we need Node to be listening on port 80. But there are a couple of things actually that are going to prevent us from getting there all the way. So just to illustrate that, let's quickly change directory into our sample sales application directory, and we'll make sure that we have the most recent code. I'm going to get stash here. Then I'll get pull, make sure I've got the most recent. Okay, now if I were to do a sales lift or using the forever command that we learned in the last video, or forever start app.js, either way, if we were to do that, it will start up, but let's see what happens and when we try to hit it. So we're going to do sales lift. We'll do -- prod to make this easy. So it did not work, and it didn't even stand up correctly. And you might be wondering why that is. Well, it has to do with some history on Unix operating systems and what ports you're allowed to listen on when you are not a root user. So we're trying to run this Node application as EC2 user, and that is not the root user. Now, one thing we could do is we could sudo su start the application as root, but you don't really want to do that. If there's a vulnerability in the web server, then running Node as root can be dangerous. Long story short, you can't run the Node application as a non-root user and be able to use port 80. So what we need to do is run Node on a port that isn't 80, and we're gonna have a different piece of software proxy requests from 80 to our port, but we'll do that one step at a time. Okay, so we need to update the port because we can't be serving the Node application from a port between 1 and 1024. So we need to set the port to something above 1024. We can just use 1337. Again, that's what it was using in development. So go ahead and update your port to be 1337 in the config environment production file. And there's actually one more thing we need to update here. In order for our sales app to properly keep the session alive, one of the settings down here at the bottom needs to be updated again. So this base URL needs to get changed to be http://your domain. So go ahead and save that, and what we're going to do is we're going to push that up to the cloud. So we're going to do a git. We'll do a git status. We're going to see that the only changes are the port and the base URL. I changed the port in the previous commit. So we've got the URL change here. So I'm going to git add that, and I'm going to git commit and say update port and base URL. We're going to go ahead and push that to our GitHub source code repository. And then from the EC2 instance, as long as we are, let's see, print working directory, where am I? Yep. As long as you're in your sales sample app folder, then go ahead and git pull. That should pull down the changes. I've got some stuff up there I need to stash. Okay, git pull. All right, so we see that we got one file that was changed. That was what we just pushed up earlier. So now that we have the base URL and the port updated on our production configuration, we should be able to actually do now a sales lift -- prod. And we should now be able to, not only will the app start instead of failing, it will serve production content from port 1337, and we're going to be able to use our domain name that we just registered to hit this. It won't be perfect, and you'll see why, but we will be able to do it. All right, so you can see that the application did succeed in starting up. Now we're on production here. So if I go to flagrantfox.com:1337, then that should get me to my sales application. There it is. And we can see that on the web server, on the Node's web server, it received the GET request and served us the assets. And we know that it's in production. It says here environment production. But that's not quite good enough, is it? We don't want to be telling our users to type in 1337. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the ways that you can solve the problem of privileged users serving content from port 80 is to use a established reverse proxy. And so we're going to install something called Nginx on our server, which provides extensive feature sets with very little overhead. And so it's a reverse proxy. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll put a link in the description below for what that's doing. But in simple terms, it's going to be listening for requests to come in, and it's going to decide where to send them out. And so it kind of is this middleman where it listens for requests and forwards them to other places. So it's going to listen on port 80 for us, and it's going to route traffic to 1337. All right, so let's kill this here, and let's clear the screen. Okay, and what we're going to do now is install Nginx. Okay, so to install Nginx, you need to do sudo yum install Nginx, and we're going to say -y. So that's going to go out and grab all the packages necessary to install Nginx. And one of the things we can do here once we've installed it is test it, right? So we can see its default behavior by going to service. We can say sudo service Nginx start. That's going to start the Nginx executable for us. And now try going to your domain, flagrantfox.com, without a port, and watch what happens. We get an Nginx splash screen. That's because, like Apache, Nginx by default has a rule for listening on port 80 and serving a particular file. Now, that's not what we want, right? We want Nginx to point to our app. So what we're going to do is update the Nginx configuration file to point to our local running app. So let's clear the screen here, and let's do a sudo vim on etc nginx. Let's see what's in here. nginx.conf. Okay, so this is the default Nginx configuration, and you don't need to worry about how most of this works. Just know that the important parts are inside this server block. So this is the rule where it's listening for traffic on port 80, and it's going to decide how to route that traffic based on what the path is in our URL. So we just need to update a couple of things. Mostly what we need to do is change this root rule here. So we're just going to delete this and get rid of the root rule. And we are going to do a location. So we're going to say on the root path, we're going to open and close our curlies here. We're going to put in between it a special couple of things. Most important is proxy pass, which just means that we're going to pass all traffic that hits slash. We're going to go to http://localhost 1:1337. Now that is going to take all traffic and send it to whatever's running on localhost 1:1337. And as we know, that's where we had our application set to run. You can also do some things where you set the headers so that you don't end up forgetting to send along information from the, if there was important information in the headers. So we're just going to add a couple of things here. We're going to proxy set header, make it so that the host is passed along, and we're going to do one more. We'll set the X forwarded for in case our client needs that remote address. Let's make this smaller here so you looks a little bit more coherent. Great. Make sure you add semicolons after these. Oop, this needs to be an underscore. Yeah, so make sure you have semicolons there, or else there will be some syntax issues. So we're gonna write and quit WQ, save that file. So what I want to do now is, if you had started the service, make sure you do a sudo service nginx stop. Now we're going to do the opposite, sudo service nginx start. So we now have Nginx sending traffic to that port. So let's see if we refresh this screen. If we refresh this, is it going to work? No, not quite, because we don't have the app running yet, but we do have Nginx running. So we can do a temporary check, sales lift -- prod. So now that we have our port set to 1337 for production, the app is going to run on 1337, Nginx is running on 80. We're going to make a request to flagrantfox.com, which is going to go by default to port 80. Nginx is going to pick that traffic up, forward it by that rule to the sales node server, and our dots should be connected. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's refresh now. There we have it. The domain is now hooked up such that it's routed through Nginx to our application. I mean, you can still interact with it even if it's not just the root. You can do you can click on any of these links here, and because that base route is slash, anything slash or beyond will get routed to this to localhost. All right, thanks very much everybody for watching. In the next video or two, we're going to talk about adding some security like certificates to our application, so that if you want people to sign into your application, or you want to do some sort of credit card processing, that the consumer will see that there's a little green lock symbol up here, and it will say secure instead of not secure, because right now we're just serving this traffic unencrypted without SSL. So we are going to do that in a future video, but I hope this helped you get your domain up and set up for your sales JavaScript app. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Yeah, and I just realized I've had these headphones on for a while, so I'm sure you enjoyed that change of scenery for me. Don't need these on. All right, everybody. See you next time.